Shalom, friends. Welcome to this shiur in Tanya, Sefer Shel Beinonim, Likutei Amarim, written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, 18th century text dealing with some important concepts relating to our soul, relating to working on oneself, growing, understanding what life is about, and understanding ourselves better. We're up to chapter 27. We're in a series of 3 chapters at the moment, 26, 27, and 28. And we're dealing with a theme at this point in time related to the different types of services that people serve God with. There is the service of the Beinoini, and there is the service of the tzaddik. The service of the Beinoini is the concept of iskafia, called subjugation, whereby when a person sees in front of him certain negative things, certain negative thoughts come into his mind, he pushes the thoughts away, not allowing the thoughts to come into speech and to action, into reality. The tzaddik, on the other hand, deals with a concept called ishafcha, which means converting, turning something over from one thing to the other. The tzaddik works with evil and he turns it into good. But the Beinoini doesn't have such skills. He doesn't have such keys that he is able to turn over negative things into positive. If only he can learn how to subjugate the negative, to not allow it to come into reality, that is his task. And as we said in the last lesson, this is the concept of the different types of delicacies that God desires in the world. It was the request of Yitzchak, of Isaac, our forefather, who said to Esau at the time, to Esav, to prepare for him delicacies that he could eat, matamim. And immediately we ask ourselves, what does it mean, matamim, tastes, different types of tastes? This was the words of the Shekhinah, the words of the divine presence, saying that God delights in the tastes of all the people in the world. He desires the tastes of the Beinoini, of the person who has to work on himself and subjugate evil, and he delights in the tastes of the tzaddik, who turns evil into good. Now, one of the ways that the Beinoini can work on the attributes of subjugation is that when something negative comes into his mind, he pushes it away, not allowing it any access so that he should come to do an aveira. However, there is another way that a person, as a Beinoini, can deal with the concept of pushing away evil, and it relates to permitted matters. And as we discussed last week, for example, if a person is eating a meal and he's got steak and he's got chips and he's got pumpkin and he's got all sorts of goodies on his plate, and at the end of the meal he leaves behind a small piece of meat, this too is a concept of iskafia, of subjugation, when he desires it and he wants it, yet he pushes it away. And he says, for the sake of sanctifying myself, holding myself back from all the physical delights, I will not engage in eating this food, even though it is 100% permissible. This is where we're up to. And it says over here, v'chein, and likewise, im bolem piv, miledaber dvarim shelebo, mitaveh od ledabram. Likewise, if a person closes his mouth from saying words that his heart desires very much to say, me'inyanei ha'olam, from things that relate to the world. For example, if a person has the desire to engage in a conversation with other people about all sorts of things of life, what's happening in the news, who should we speak about now? It could be things that are totally forbidden, which of course are forbidden, and it could be things that are totally permissible. Yet even though it's permissible, it's a waste of words to engage in the discussion. Perhaps you know of such events where people go out for lunch, they go to the restaurant, and while they're at the restaurant, they begin to talk about all sorts of concepts of events that are happening in life. This one did this and that happened to this, and this is what's going on in the world here, and what do you think about this? And actually, the conversation goes nowhere except to waste time and to waste words. If a person is holding on this level of the Beinoini, who wants to sanctify himself, he does so by closing his mouth off so that he doesn't allow himself to express things that are unnecessary to express. And all the more so if they're forbidden, but even if they aren't forbidden and they're permitted, he still says no to those particular words. V'chein, and likewise, behirhure machashavto, when a person thinks thoughts in his mind, afilu b'ma'at mizer, even if it's just a little bit, the iskafia sitra achra letata, and he holds back the thoughts from manifesting themselves in reality. A bad thought enters his mind, and even for after a moment or two, he pushes the bad thought out of his mind. He causes that the dearness, the specialness, the beauty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Holy One, blessed be He, to ascend higher very, very much. When a person is able to push aside something that he yearns for, his evil inclination stirs up inside him and says, go ahead and think these thoughts. Go ahead and speak out these things. Go ahead and do these things. And even though they're permitted, he says, I will not engage in those things because they are unnecessary. What is necessary? Thoughts of Torah, words of Torah, actions of Torah. What about eating? Eating is necessary also. Eating is permissible. But nevertheless, how do I deal with combating? How do I deal with fighting the war against the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that strives to topple me? I say that even though this meal is in front of me and it is a very tasty meal, I will put aside a little bit of the meal. That means I do not need to engage in an entire fast. All I need to do is push aside a portion of food and say, even though I'm hungry and even though I want to eat that food, I'm going to stop myself from eating that food. And in that way, that itself is a subjugation of the evil inclination. That is what is known as iskafia. It is the duty of the Beinoini to engage in such avodah, in such service. The Zehu Shamru Razal, and this is what our rabbis have taught us. Adam mekadesh atzmo ma'at lemata. When a person sanctifies himself a little bit down below in this world, mekadshin oto harbe milamaila. They sanctify him very much above. It's a very interesting idea, this concept that we're speaking about now of how to improve oneself, how to subjugate oneself. To what degree do we need to go to subjugate? Those who are interested could take a look, for example, chapter 571 in the Shulchan Aruch, in section of Orach Chaim, the first section of the Shulchan Aruch, which in fact deals with the complicated laws of fasting. And in that particular chapter, it deals with this very subject that we're speaking about, that fasting is not only the concept of being without food, but there are many levels to it, in a way that a person can come close to Hashem even without the full fast. And here is one of those ways. When we subjugate, we push aside the drive that we have that brings us towards these physical things, and we say, I will not engage completely. As soon as a person does that, he holds himself back and he subjugates that evil. Then the Torah says, when a person sanctifies himself a little below, he does the most minimal thing, God comes from above and sanctifies him to a much greater degree. Levad, mitzvahs asay shel Torah, with the exception, not only is it, but also he even fulfills the positive mitzvah of the Torah, v'hiskadishtem, and you shall sanctify, k'shemakadesh atzmo, when a person sanctifies himself, b'mutar lo, with that is permissible for him. We have a principle in the Torah, kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lecha. Sanctify yourself in what is permitted to you. Take things that are permitted and sanctify what is allowed. I see in front of me, for example, that they have brought out the lamb, they have brought out the beef, and there is a large chunk of beef for me. It is a 300-gram steak. It is a 500-gram steak, and I'm permitted to eat all 500 grams. I can make a blessing before, and I can make a blessing afterwards. But if I am working on myself to sanctify myself, I do so by eating only a small portion of the meat, and the rest of it I push aside and say, even though it is permitted, I sanctify myself in that is permitted to me. Upeirosh vehis kadishtem, and this explanation of this word that says, you shall sanctify yourselves, sheta'atsu atzmechem kedoshim, you shall make yourselves holy. How do you make yourself holy? Klomar, which means to say, even though it is truthfully a no kadosh, a person is not really holy, muvdal misitra achra, and he has not yet separated himself from the other side, the forces of evil. The Beinoini, unfortunately, is still cleaving to the desires of the evil inclination. The evil side is forcing him on, is edging him on, is telling him, do this particular thing. Even in permissible matters, it edges him on even further, trying to encourage him to do more and more to exercise the animalistic soul that he has. Because this evil inclination is at its full strength, ubegvurasa, and its power, ketoldasa, as it was when it was initially, since it was born from the very beginning. B'chalalasmali, in the left side of the heart, in the left ventricle of the heart, that is where the evil inclination sits. In the right ventricle of the heart, that is where the godly inclination sits. And in the left side of the heart, their blood is pumping away and inspiring one, encouraging one in the direction of negativity. Rak, however, only shekovesh yitzro, a person conquers his inclination, umekadesh atzmo, and he sanctifies himself. It is permissible for me to eat 12 apples, yet I will sanctify myself and eat only one. It is permissible for me to have 3 liters of coffee in the morning, nevertheless, I will have just 1 cup. Whatever it is that's permissible for me, I push aside anything that is extraneous, anything that is extra, and I say, I will not engage my evil inclination, my animalistic soul, in that, even though it is permitted. V'yisim kadoshim, and you shall be holy. What does it mean? What is the promise that the Torah is giving us? Klomar, this means to say, the end result will be that a person will indeed be holy. If we try to be holy, then God will assist us so that indeed we will become holy, or muvdal, and separated be'emet, in truth, me'asitra akra, from the side of negativity, from the other side, the evil inclination. Let us not forget that the word, of course, kadosh, which is holy, actually means separated. We speak, for example, about a prostitute who is known as a kadesha. Why is she called a kadesha? What does she have to do with holiness, which is kadosh? Because the word kadosh means separate. The prostitute is separate from society in the path that she takes, which is very different to the norms of society. And the person who is kadosh lahavdil is on the opposite side of the kadesha. That person is striving towards the separate levels of holiness to attach themselves to God. Because of the way that they sanctify him, meaning from above, harbe, a lot, milamaila, from above, oto, and they help him, legarshamilibo ma'at ma'at, and they help him to push aside from his heart, a little bit at a time, this evil that rests within himself. So the idea is as follows. What is happening over here is that the Beinoini, separate from the tzaddik is involved in ishafka, he converts the bad into good. The Beinoini says, I do not know how to convert bad into good. What is my task in life? The iskafia. I need to subjugate the evil. 2 types of evil. There's an evil which is really evil, and there is an evil which is inside good. Too much good can also be evil. Too much of a permitted thing can also be bad. And therefore, when I want to sanctify myself in order to get closer to Hashem, there are 2 ways I can do it. When I see, for example, that there is an evil thought that enters my mind, I push the evil aside and I do not allow it to manifest itself. On the other hand, when there are good things going on, like permitted things that I'm allowed to engage in, even there, I push away a part of that good thing which awakens the evil inclination in me, and I say to myself, I will not allow my animal soul to engage itself more than necessary in what I am doing in this world. This point in time, we move to chapter 28. We're continuing because the shiur is still going on. Va'afilu im noflim lo hirurei ta'avot u'sha'ar machshavot zarot b'sha'as avodah. And even if it will be that there will fall to a person thoughts of desires and other types of foreign thoughts at the time that he is engaged in serving Hashem. Now, there are two types of times when a person can be affected by negative thoughts. One time is when he is engaged in his general work. While he is working, all sorts of negative thoughts come to his mind. The Alter Rebbe said, don't be afraid. Don't worry if the negative thoughts attack you while you are engaged in work. What should you do? Fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah. V'lo toturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem. Do not stray after your heart. Don't stray after your heart and after your eyes. You have the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of not straying after the heart, not straying after the eyes. You fulfill a mitzvah even though the bad thought comes into your mind. But now there is another type of thought that is distracting, and that is when it occurs at a time that a person is engaged in serving Hashem. What does he do then? In the middle of davening, stray thoughts come to him. In the middle of mitzvah performance, stray thoughts come to him. But Torah or betfilah bekavana, while he's studying Torah, he's getting these negative thoughts. Or betfilah bekavana, or while he's davening and he has intention, the negative thoughts come to him. How should he deal with it then? Al yashis leiv alehin. Let him not pay any attention to them. The thoughts come to the person while he's davening. Shmona Esrei. As he begins to daven Shmona Esrei, Baruch Atah Hashem. As he begins, all of a sudden, he finds himself in the marketplace. In his thoughts, he begins to think that perhaps he's somewhere else. Or he's thinking about the latest movie that people are talking about. Or he's thinking about the latest delicacy. Something in his mind distracts him of whatever it is that he's engaged in at the moment, which is praying to God. Al yashis leiv aleihin. The Alter Rebbe says, don't pay any attention to these thoughts whatsoever. Ella, but rather, yasiach daito. He should divert his attention mehen from them. Karega, in a moment. As soon as the thought comes to the person's mind, he's engaged in praying to God, and the thought enters his mind. What should he do? Don't worry about it. Push the thought away. V'gam, likewise. Al yehi sheite. Don't be stupid, he says. Don't be a fool. La'asok ba'alat hamidas. To engage yourself in causing an ascent of the attributes. Shalamakshava. Of thought, alamakshava zara, of the foreign thoughts, kenoida, as is known. Because this was only said to the tzaddikim. What is the Alter Rebbe speaking about? There is the following concept amongst the tzaddikim, not amongst the Beinonim. If you're a Beinoni, you cannot engage in this avodah. If you are a tzaddik, you will know already how to engage in the avodah. And this is known as ha'alat hamidot, the ascent of the attributes. What do we mean when we speak about the attributes? We have six really main attributes. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. There are six main emotive attributes that are the powers of the soul. And the following thing occurs to people. For example, when a person is engaged, let's say, in a sexual sin, this comes about because a person has perverted the attribute of chesed, of kindness. You see, kindness is all about giving, extending oneself, love. Well, when love becomes perverted, it becomes perverted in the realm of sexual immorality, that a person will come to do things that he shouldn't engage in. Now, gevura, for example, which relates to fear, an attribute of fear, can be negative in the sense that it can lead to destruction. It can lead to murder. So the attribute has within it the aspect of good, which is kindness, which can be turned into evil, sexual immorality. The attribute has within it the realm of fear of God, but it can be turned into an attribute of attacking another person. That is what gevura is. So in every midah, there is a positive side and a negative side. When we fail at something, it is because we have taken the midah, which contains holiness, and we have allowed the midah to fall. When it falls, it reaches a lower level instead of going to a higher level. The tzaddik is able to see how the sin relates to the particular midah, and he is able to cause with his meditation a flow of thoughts to take the negative energy of the sin that the person is involved in and bring it to a higher level. The Alter Rebbe is telling us, don't think that if negative thoughts come to you, that you are on the level to be able to ascend these thoughts, to bring these thoughts to a higher level. Let me just share a story over here, which is a fascinating story. It's somewhat related to what we're saying, and at least we'll understand the concept in greater depth. The story is told about the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber Shnuri. A very interesting idea. The Mittler Rebbe was the second Rebbe of Chabad. He was the son of the Alter Rebbe, the son of the rabbi who wrote the book that we're reading at this point in time. And his name, of course, was Rabbi Dov Ber Shnuri. He was called Shnuri because his father was Shner Zalman, and therefore he was called Shnuri. His surname was Shnuri, whereas his father, who was the son of Baruch, was known as Rabbi Shner Zalman, not just of Liadi, he was also called Rabbi Shner Zalman Baruchovitz. That apparently was his surname. When the Tzemach Tzedek took over, he took upon himself the name of his grandfather by calling himself Shner Son. In other words, the son of Shner, in other words, Shner Zalman, the Alter Rebbe. Although, of course, he was the grandson, but that's how he got his surname. And ever since then, all the descendants afterwards, after the Tzemach Tzedek, were all known as Shnersons. That is how the name came about. Now, the second Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, once took a holiday trip to a particular place. And while he was in this particular location, he decided, since he saw that there were a lot of people they knew about that he'd come into town, and they all wanted to meet up with him. And he decided at this point in time that he was going to hold Yechidus, even though he was actually on holiday. Holiday for the Rebbe is not holiday what we're talking about. He wasn't out by the beach and sunbathing. That's not what we're talking about. He was simply removing himself from his general post to engage in whatever activities he wanted to engage in on a private level. But nevertheless, people knew that he was in town, and they all came to see him for Yechidus. So he told his secretaries, it's fine, let us do Yechidus with everybody. Yechidus is when the Rebbe meets with the Hasidim, and he begins to connect with them on a very high level, and he's able to interact with them and tell them answers to questions that they have about their lives, what to do with their lives, how to get on with their lives, to give them brachot, and so on and so forth. Very beautiful thing that is held in the world of Hasidus. Anyway, these people were coming through, and at a certain point in time, the Rebbe stopped the Yechidus, and he told everybody to please leave. Everybody must leave immediately. So everybody got a shock. Why is it that the Rebbe said that we should all leave? Why can't we stay for the Yechidus? People have already been in here. It's not quite fair. All of a sudden, the Rebbe tells the secretaries and everybody, please leave. Leave me alone. At that point in time, the doors are closed, and some of the senior Hasidim come by, and they stand by the door. While they're standing by the door, they hear the Rebbe, he's beginning to cry bitterly. They couldn't believe it. The Rebbe is sitting and wailing and crying. He's reciting Tehillim, all sorts of things going on in the room. What's going on? The next thing you know, the Rebbe doesn't have any lunch. He's not eating anything. He leaves the room. He's ill for the rest of the day. And it's just been absolutely terrible. Anyway, the next day, seems, after all of these things have been going on, a certain point in time in the day, the Rebbe turns to his secretaries and he says to them, we can continue the Yechidus, it's not a problem. So one of the secretaries comes up to him and says, we don't understand, what is it that the Rebbe was going through yesterday, that he turned everybody down from the Yechidus, and now he's back to the Yechidus again. We heard him crying and all these different things. The Rebbe says, I want to tell you something. When a Chassid comes to a Rebbe and he needs assistance, and here is the identifying feature of the Rebbe. When a Chassid comes to the Rebbe and he needs assistance, the Rebbe needs to find within himself a spark of the difficult situation, of the problem that the Chassid is experiencing. And when he sees the same problem within himself, because he is on a very high level of Kedusha, he is able to advise the Chassid in exactly the right path that is suitable for him. Only when the Rebbe is able to identify within himself the same difficulty that the Chassid is going through, is he able then to tell the Chassid what he needs to do. He says, and I'll tell you what happened to me yesterday. Somebody came to me and they expressed such a terrible thing that they had done that I could not find within myself one iota, nothing of a resemblance of the problem, of the Aveira, of anything that was going on. And therefore, I realized I could not give him any advice. At that point in time, I told everybody to leave the room and I closed the door in order that I could begin a process of teshuvah, of returning to God, so that God would help me to be able to see within myself the same problem that this Chassid was dealing with, the same Aveira that he was dealing with. Of course, for the Rebbe, he's going to perceive it on his high level, incomparable to the Chassid who is actually involved in the Aveira itself. The Rebbe is not involved in the Aveira, but the Rebbe needs to identify with the spiritual roots from where the Aveira is coming from in order to heal the situation. The Rebbe said he began to engage in this teshuvah. He was fasting for the rest of the day. He says, and only now, when I say to you that we can have all of the Yechidus to come back again, did I realize that God had accepted my teshuvah. And at that point in time, I saw within myself the very same problem, obviously to a different degree altogether, on a very high spiritual level. He was able to identify within himself the same Aveira, inverted commas, of what the Chassid had been doing in his own life. Of course, on a very high level. He says, and at that point in time, he was now able to offer the advice and the assistance to the Chassid to get him right. The tzaddik is able to intrude, and to infiltrate into the mind of the Chassid, who is now exposed to the Aveira on a physical level, and he is able to put himself there on a very high spiritual level to see where the root of the problem is. And as soon as he sees the root, he's able to take that negative and cause it to go upwards, back to its source. Once it goes back to its source, all that remains in this world are sparks of holiness, and all the negativity is taken out. This is called ha'alat hamidot, the ascent of the attributes. Only a tzaddik can do this because he understands how to look into the soul of the chassid to see where the problem is, to understand how to cause it to ascend. When we are davening and our thoughts become filled with all sorts of negative things that distract us, it is a sign that we are connecting with some very evil things. The problem is that because we are attached to the evil things in the physical world, it is no good for us to attempt to get ourselves out of the situation by causing the midot to ascend, because we ourselves are held down here below and cannot get ourselves up. The tzaddik, on the other hand, the righteous individual, is so far removed from this that he perceives and he sees into the problem of where that negative energy is coming from in the worlds above, and he is able to attach the negativity back to its source, back into chesed, back into gevura, and as a result, he takes the negative and he brings it to the highest levels of holiness by putting it back into its source and bringing down into the world only sparks of holiness. This is known as ha'alat hamidot, as we see over here, and as we see as we see over here, we cannot engage in the halat hamidot shel hamakshava zara of this foreign thought, kenoita as is known, ki lo nemru dvarim ahem ela letzadikim, because everything that we've been speaking about up to now only was in the domain of the righteous individuals, she'ein noflim lahim makshavot zarot shelahim, that they do not fall to them any types of foreign thoughts, ki im mishel acherim, except the thoughts of others. When the tzaddik is engaged in his avodah to Hashem, he also receives these evil thoughts coming to him, but they are not his thoughts at all. They are the thoughts of other people that come to him for the sake of a saint. It is brought down in various holy books, the same type of idea, that there are many souls in the worlds above who seek tikkun, who seek rectification, and very often they will appear to tzaddikim and they will come down in order that the tzaddik will recognize who the soul is and to be able to bring the soul back to the level that it should be to effect the tikkun, the rectification that is necessary. The soul comes down in order to ascend higher. Aval, mi shenofel lo, mi shelo, but a person who the thought falls down into himself from his own thoughts, mibechinas harash belibo, which comes from the aspect of evil in his own heart, bekalala smali, which comes about in the left side of the heart, the left ventricle. Eichya alehu lemala, how can he cause it to ascend above? V'hu atzmo mekushar lemata, and he himself is connected down below, as we said. However, afal pikein, even though that's the case, al yipol libo, let a person's heart not fall bekirbo, inside himself. Don't be upset when the negative thoughts attack at the time of davening. Lihiyot mizeh atsev nivzeh b'shas avoida, that a person will fall into a tremendous depression. He'll be totally out of things while he is serving Hashem. He's busy davening, and while he's davening, the negative thought comes to him. And what does he think to himself? I'm a terrible person for thinking these terrible thoughts. How can a person like me think such dreadful thoughts? Shetzarich liyot b'simcha rabba, and a person has to be always very happy. Ela adrabba, on the contrary, yitzchazek yoter, a person should strengthen himself even more. V'yosif ometz, and he should put in more strength, b'chol kocho, with all his energy, b'kavanat tefillah, in the intention of his prayer, b'chedva, with happiness, v'simcha yesera, and with even additional joy, b'sumo elibo, as he puts into his heart, ki nefilas hamachshava zara, that when this thought falls down, when this foreign thought falls down into his mind, he mehaklipa shebachalal asmali, it comes about from the husk which is on the left side of the heart, ha'oseh milchama beinoini, and its whole drive is in order to stimulate a war with the Beinoini, with the average person, im nefesh elohis shebo, with his godly soul. The goal of the evil inclination is to stir up no good against the good inclination. The goal of evil is to be as mischievous as possible, to disrupt the flow of good, of the nature of the godly soul that a Jew has. V'noida derech hanilchamim, and that is known as is the way of warriors. V'cheinane bokim, and people who are wrestling each other, yachad, together. Kashe echad miskaber, when one of them strengthens himself, azah hasheni mitameitz litkaber gam kein b'chol ma'amatzei chocho, then the second one will strengthen himself. He'll put in all the effort that he can to strengthen himself also with all his energies. This is the nature of wrestlers, as we discussed before. When the one wrestler begins to become stronger on the other wrestler and he's pushing him in one direction, it is the nature of the other wrestler to push back even harder. Which means what? Which means practically when I'm davening and the bad thought comes to me, why did the bad thought come to me? On the contrary, it is not because I'm bad. It is because I'm so focused now on doing good. And as I begin to think about the goods that I want to achieve, connecting with God, thinking about good things, It is the nature of the Yetzer Hara, this mischief maker, to come along and to push full force against me, to put me into a depression, to make me think that these bad thoughts that I'm having are because there's something wrong with me. But it is the opposite. It is because my thoughts are so good that the negative thoughts attack strongly against me, to put me away, to disrupt me from my service of God, to disrupt me from being happy and satisfied and being excited that I'm growing and getting closer to God. And therefore, when the godly soul is putting in all of its effort and strengthening itself to pray, then the klipa, the husk, strengthens itself against it, to confuse it and to cause it to fall down, and it's going to have a bad effect with its negative thoughts, with its foreign thoughts. This is not like the mistake that people make in the world, that they claim to prove that when the bad thought comes into a person's mind while he's busy davening or engaged in a mitzvah, and they begin to think it must be that their tefillah, their prayer is worth nothing, that if they were to be davening correctly, and in the correct manner, that there would fall to them, would never fall to them, any foreign thoughts. And the truth is, they would be correct, their words would be correct, if there was only one soul. That would be the soul that would be praying. And it would be this that was thinking and considering all of these foreign thoughts. If that was the case, their words would be correct. But if you want to say true of all truths, there are really two souls in a person's body. And they are fighting the one against the other. In a person's mind. Each one's desire is to rule over him. And it wants to rule over him, to be in his mind that it should be filled with it alone. Okay, so we're going to stop over here because otherwise I'm just going on. I'm not going to make it to the end, unfortunately. So the main thing to remember is here, we're fighting a war. And these two souls are fighting against each other. The more the godly soul comes out, the more the animalistic soul wants to fight against it. The Alter Rebbe is telling us, don't get distressed, don't get depressed, don't get worried. When engaged in tefillah and all of a sudden a negative thought comes into a person's mind, don't worry about it. It is only a sign that we are working on ourselves to become even greater, and the Yetzer Hara is upset with us and fighting against us to win the battle. Thanks for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Sher from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur or got something out of it, please do click on the like button in the YouTube underneath over here so that you can show your appreciation. It helps me, and I know that I'm on the right track and you're getting something out of it. Please subscribe to my channel, share this video with family and friends. We're really trying to get out there, and the more that we share, the more we're able to do and to produce. I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I'm always available. If you want to email me, just contact me via my site. In the meantime, I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.